first down. The handoff to Marlon Mack. Huge hole, 50-yard line. He's at the 40, still going near sideline. He's at the 10. He's at the 5, and he will score. Touchdown, Marlon Mack. Touchdown, INDY. And again, it's picked up. It's Darius Leonard. Leonard with his second INT, and he's streaking down the near sideline. He's at the 40. He's at the 30. He's at the 20. He's going to go. A pick six for the Maniac.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Bring the Juice podcast. On with me, friend of the show, Mr. George Bremer. George, you just finished up day 3 of Colts training camp. It wasn't rainy today. We were joking off air. Yesterday was more of an ugly day in terms of weather-wise. Seems like it's a beautiful day. Where I'm looking outside my window, it's sunny with barely a cloud in the sky. So how was day 3 for you in Colts training camp?
Yeah, gorgeous day. It's been interesting being back at football practice. It's probably the most normal thing I've done in the last 5 months. I mean, there's obviously a lot of changes. Very few of us out there right now. It's not what you're used to at training camp. You were out there last year, you know, the sideline gets packed and you're kind of shoulder to shoulder with everybody. And obviously that's not happening right now. We're wearing masks the entire practice. Everybody's a good 6 feet away. But, you know, when practice starts, it's what you're used to. It's watching football again. And that's really been, I think, nice the last 3 days just to do something, anything that feels like the time before the coronavirus ruled our lives.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm curious for you. Obviously, now there's been 3 days of full padded practice. What have been some highlights from you from all 3 days? What have been some things that stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, and it just keeps happening day after day right now, is Taekwon Lewis. Frank Wright kind of mentioned it earlier today in his Zoom call. But Taekwon has been exceptionally good, especially in the one-on-ones. He's been going against Quentin Nelson. He's been winning every day. It's one of those things you're not quite sure what to make of it. I mean, we saw last year, you were out there quite a bit last year. You saw Quentin struggled in one-on-ones. I think for him, it's similar to pitchers in spring training. They're working on a certain pitch or a certain part of their delivery, and they're not really worried about the results. They may give up 5 runs in an inning, and they don't care because they were working on a cut fastball or whatever.
Right.
I think it's similar. I think it's very similar with Quentin in those one-on-ones, trying a new technique. But it's obviously been a good indicator for Taekwon Lewis. He's done it in 11-on-11 at times as well. And right now we're trying to weigh that balance. Last summer, Grover Stewart really started the same way. You started to see him come on the radar. He was really dominant practice after practice. That ended up carrying over into the season, and he had a really breakout year. But, you know, you also think of guys like Caesar Rayford or any number of guys on the list of preseason heroes who had never really translated to the regular season. It's a great start for Taekwon. I'm interested to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I know Taekwon Lewis said when he was asked by the media, I feel like mentally he took the entire offseason to kind of get mentally, physically prepared, and also the relationship with the new defensive line coach, Brian Baker. How big do you think that relationship is for what we've seen early on? Granted, it is early on, but how big do you think that is for a guy like Taekwon Lewis, who has notoriously kind of struggled to just get on the field and be productive? How big do you think that relationship is with Baker early on here for Lewis?
Yeah, I think the whole defensive line really. Brian Baker's a guy that brings a lot of energy out there, a fiery kind of guy, you know, old school in a lot of ways. He very much likes the big dancing bear type of linemen, which I think Taekwon Lewis can be. You know, that's the mold for him. That's where he wants to get. I think the whole defensive line in general seems to be fired up. They have nothing but good things to say about Coach Baker. But obviously for Taekwon, I think it's huge. I mean, you're looking at a guy who's fighting for his job. I mean, everybody is. We know that. It's the NFL. Your job's on the line every day. But Taekwon in particular, been disappointing these first couple of years. Lots of injuries. Hasn't been able to kind of show what he wants to show out there. And for him to have a coach now who he feels like is 100% in tune with him, I just think that maybe that's the confidence that we're seeing on the field now. But I think it can do nothing but good things for him as he moves forward.
Absolutely. And staying with that defensive line, one thing that I noticed, because, Derek and I, my other co-hosts, we've been talking about, this defensive end position alongside Justin Houston. We're trying to figure out, okay, what players are actually in competition for that? We threw out Lewis's name, but obviously he's been working more inside. Danico Autry's been playing a lot more defensive end. I'm curious your thoughts on Autry kind of sliding outside a little bit. He's played some defensive end so far with the Colts a couple times, but, he was the 3 technique a year ago and the year before that. So what are your thoughts on him kind of moving outside, potentially taking the other defensive end spot alongside Houston?
Yeah, I think he's an interesting guy out there. I mean, he's obviously got a lot of athleticism, and that's helped him on the inside. But I think when he's out at end, he has a little more freedom to move. He seems to get a little more steam underneath him when he's out there. You do wonder a little bit whether he'll hold up against the run the way that Jabal Sheard was able to, the last couple of years. Yeah. I think it's definitely something he can do. It's just not something we've seen him have to do a lot out there at end. Obviously, it's a different situation inside. He's definitely, if not the leader in the clubhouse right now, he's definitely a major contender in there. The other guy I think who's kind of a dark horse who doesn't get a lot of recognition is Al-Qadim Muhammad. Yeah. He's had some good practices here early on. We weren't at the very, very beginning, the first 2-3 days. We weren't really there. But, Andrew Walker does a great job with the Colts website, and he was reporting that the Muhammad looked good. And really the last 3 days, since they put the pads on, that hasn't changed. He's gotten some more reps. I think if there's an upside to Justin Houston missing the 2 days at the beginning of this week with a little bit of a neck situation, it's that Muhammad got more snaps, Autry got more snaps. They were able to take a longer look at those guys. And I feel like those two guys are going to be the main contenders, especially with Toure still kind of on the sideline, healing up a little bit. It'll be interesting to see, though, how that changes in personnel packages. The base defense, I think it'll be Autry or Muhammad, but I can easily see Autry moving inside when they go to that green package that Matt Eberflus likes so much, that pass rush scheme, and then have Tomoko Toure come out and be the other end in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of Justin Houston, he missed the first 2 days of practice. I think he got injured. I think it was a week prior. It was like a neck injury, so they kind of sat him out. He returned today, which is definitely a good sign. Xavier Rhodes also returned today after missing Tuesday with an illness. I'm not sure if they specified what that illness was exactly, but they said, I believe it was a non-COVID illness, which obviously is huge for Xavier Rhodes. I'm curious kind of your take, because you've been able to watch Xavier Rhodes. How has he done the first couple days at practice, I guess Monday and then today? How has he done against some of these Colts receivers?
Yeah, you can see his physicality a little bit already. I think that's one of the things that they really want from him. He made a tackle today on a run play where he kind of he grabbed at Nyheim Hines high, and then momentum kind of carried Hines to the ground, and it just kind of reminded you this is a guy who's not afraid to stick his nose in there. I think he's similar to Vontae Davis in that vein, where he's going to come up and be a factor in the run game when he needs to be a factor in some of those short check down passes, maybe discourage guys from wanting to catch those quite as much as they have in the past. Yeah. All the receivers in the corners, I thought Phillip Rivers really put it well today earlier. There's been a lot of give and take. It's been very much in one-on-ones, and even in the 11-on-11 action and 7-on-7, the offense will win a rep and the defense will come back and get a win. And Rhodes has been in that same vein. I think it's interesting because he's a veteran guy. Obviously, he's been around 8 years. He's been to a couple Pro Bowls, but he's learning a lot of new stuff right now too. This defense, he's going to be asked to play a little bit differently, a little more zone than he has in the past. He's excited about it. He says it's easier for him than what he did in Minnesota. But I think there's a little bit of a transition period, especially these first few days in pads.
Oh, for sure. And you mentioned the practice ended, which appeared to be, you said, a third down competition drill. Seemed like the offense won those three. They swept all 3 reps with completions by Rivers. So it is kind of that give and take type of thing. Sometimes the defense will come up, like you said. Also, George Odom came up with an interception. So it's just kind of that give and take right now. And I know some people were kind of, when they heard Phillip Rivers threw an interception, they're like, oh man, maybe it wasn't his offensive line. I saw a comment like that, but George, I think people just need to understand that it's just kind of getting the rust off right now. And like you mentioned with Quentin Nelson, it's not, it's practice for a reason. You're trying new things. You're figuring out things. There's no concern, right, from you. I would anticipate no concern from you with those type of things if Philip Rivers throws an interception or whatever happens. I mean, it's still early on into training camp.
Yeah, it's still early. We saw Andrew Luck do that, early in training camp. And honestly, last year I thought Jacoby did a really good job of avoiding interceptions in camp. It doesn't always translate to the season. It is what it is out there right now. As you mentioned, guys trying different things, guys looking at different situations. And really, I thought yesterday, I thought the interception was mostly on Rivers. He was looking for Jack Doyle over the middle, and he just threw the ball too high and airmailed it a little bit. That's going to happen. That's part of the game. Today, I thought really as much as anything, it was a great play by George Odom. He'll do that from time to time. We've seen from him quite often. He's got a nose for the football. He hasn't had a lot of opportunities, but it feels like every time that kid gets on the field, he's around the ball, knocking it loose, getting interceptions, getting his hands on the football. He had a great game against Kansas City last year in that upset win for the Colts. And to me, it felt more like that. It was a deep ball to Paris Campbell, and Odom really he tracked it well the whole way. He got in good position. He had good coverage, and he made the play. And I think you just kind of tip your cap to the safety on a play like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and speaking of the safeties, Malik Hooker met with media today, talking about a few different things. Obviously, first, his reaction to the fifth-year option being declined by the Colts. He talked about how he said he'll control what he can control. Feels like he needs to prove himself again this year. Do you agree with that statement, George? Do you think Malik Hooker, it's a year for him that he really has to prove that he deserves another contract with Indianapolis?
Yeah, when they declined that option, it basically became a one-year prove-it deal for him now, and I think he kind of alluded to that. He said it's a motivating factor for him. Obviously, he didn't really say he was upset at the ruling when it came down to the decision when he learned of it, but he was frustrated. I think he felt like he had done some things, and he wants to be here. He made that very clear. He loves Indianapolis. He loves the Colts. He wants to stay here, and so now for him, it's really about. He said he felt like he had 7 or 8 really good games last year, and now it's taking that and making that 16 really good games.
Yeah, he mentioned that. He said he wants to create more turnovers. He also wants to be more consistent, which is something I think we can all agree on. Malik Hooker has been a very flashy player the first couple of years. Obviously, his rookie year, he couldn't help that with the injury happening. But, especially last year, he had some games where he looked really good. And he had some other games where, he'd lose a guy in coverage or, and make a mental error. And that is just key for him. And also staying healthy, I think, is going to be big for him, earning a contract extension. But it was good to hear from Hooker, I think, just also to hear kind of his love for Indy because we didn't know where his head was at after that. And another thing that I think of note is Hooker said this is the first offseason he's felt like he's had a fully healthy offseason. And he says he's mentally, physically, emotionally ready to get out there and play ball. So that definitely has to be a big factor for him. I know Taekwon Lewis has said similar things. Some of these guys who we're not entirely sure if they're in the Colts' plans for the future. Certainly good for them early on to get some healthy starts here at training camp.
Yeah, and Malik in particular, he had a really good defensive play yesterday, knocking the ball away from Jack Doyle on a good throw by Rivers, and Malik just got his body where he needed to be and got a hand out, and it really gave Doyle no chance to make the play. And Frank Reich said he went through and showed that play in the quarterback room later in the day when they were doing film study because it was just that kind of a textbook kind of defensive moment, and that's what Malik's capable of, and I think everybody knows that. Everyone's excited about where his ceiling can be now. It's just a matter of this is the year to get there.
Let me ask you this. Do you think it's going to help Malik Hooker's game? Obviously consistency and stuff on his end, but just the addition of DeForest Buckner and some of these defensive linemen that we think will get more pressure on the quarterback. How much do you think that'll help a guy like Malik Hooker now, wanting to be more consistent, wanting to make more plays? How do you think that'll help his game improve?
Yeah, that's a huge part of this. I mean, everybody knows the Colts ran this system in the past. You've seen it in Tampa for years. You saw Chicago run it with a lot of efficiency. When they went to the Super Bowl, it's a defense that so much of it relies on getting that ball out quickly. You know, when Indianapolis was doing it well, you had Robert Mathis, you had Dwight Freeney closing in on quarterbacks, not letting them get comfortable in the pocket. And that obviously is going to have a big impact on the secondary, their ability to make plays. The less time they've got to spend in coverage, you know, the easier it's going to be for them to play the football and make big plays and turn games around. And I think that's the Colts feel like Buckner's going to help that in so many ways. I mean, he's obviously going to create pressure himself up the middle, but he should open things up for Justin Houston. And, you know, honestly, if you look at a line, and I imagine their green package will look something like this, if you look at a line with Justin Houston and DeForest Buckner and then Denico Autry next to Buckner inside it and Kamoko Toure on the outside on the other side, that's going to be really tough to block. You got somebody's going to get one-on-one, and it's probably going to mean that the quarterback doesn't have a lot of time to get rid of the football.
Oh, for sure. And all these guys have shown they can get after the quarterback, which is huge. Obviously, Autry had a year last year that was kind of down from his sack total, but he's proven that he can be effective at getting after the quarterback. So certainly I think will help in that aspect. The last kind of topic I want to talk about, George, really is this kicking competition, because I think it's a huge, you know, it's been a big thing. It's one of my top burning questions for the Colts this year. What have been your overall impressions of both these kickers? I feel like they've both been pretty consistent from what I've heard so far in training camp. What are your impressions, first off, of both these guys? And then right now, if you had to make a decision, and if you think the Colts have to make a decision on the kicker, who do you think gets the nod right now?
Yeah, it's really tight. We kind of talked to Bubba Ventrone a little bit before practice today informally, and he said, you know, at that point, he's got no reason not to give his opinion. There's no camera around, nothing's being recorded, and he said it's really close. It's super tight right now. Anthony Walker said we've only seen one day of the competition. Anthony Walker said he felt like didn't feel like Rodrigo did win the first 2 days. Chase came back and won the competition yesterday, but just to give you an idea of how tight it is, Chase McLaughlin won the competition yesterday because Rodrigo Blankenship missed one kick. That's the difference in the competition yesterday. And I think Walker alluded to the fact that maybe Chase had one bad day in there, but you know, he came back, had a perfect day yesterday. It's been a really, really tight race. I think Frank Reich mentioned today that they're both kind of different in the way they approach it. Chase is kind of a loose kind of guy. He doesn't really care, you know, just put the ball down and I'll kick it. Doesn't matter where it is. Mm-hmm. Not real concerned with a lot of the technical issues going on. Rodrigo's more of a detail-oriented guy, you know, very studious about his craft. But they both are efficient. They're both effective. And I think that really is probably the number one battle in training camp. What's fun is they haven't assigned permanent teams, but every time there is a kicking competition, which has been about every other day, Coach Reich will sit down and he'll say, okay, everybody with the number 50 and up, you're with on Tuesday it was Rodrigo. Everybody 50 and lower than 50, you're with Chase. Whichever kicker wins, the other group runs sprints. So there are stakes here. And I think that's going to be interesting. This early on, I would say Chase maybe has the slightest edge just because he's a veteran. They know they've seen him do it, you know, in games. But Blankenship's such an interesting kid. He became a little bit of a celebrity down there at Georgia. So he's dealt with even a little bit of a spotlight. I mean, you're in the SEC and you've got your own fan base, you know, you're definitely not playing in a quiet environment. He's had those big moments and he's come through in the majority of them. Won the Luke Groza Award last year. So I really feel like this is something that's going to go down to probably the final days of training camp before they make a decision. And it's going to be a really, really tight competition.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's crazy that you say Chase McLaughlin's a veteran. He's only been in the league 1 year, but that just shows you, man, like both these guys are young. Both of these guys are very good kickers. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing who wins this competition. I think I'm probably with you just overall at the start of training camp. I was like, I'd probably give it to Chase unless he's just completely getting beat out by Hot Rod. So certainly going to be an interesting battle to watch. But, you know, I kind of am at the point where I'm like, you know, whoever the Colts feel like is the best kicker, I'm not going to have an issue with it. Both these guys have shown, at least early on, that they both are very effective at kicking. So, well, George, thank you so much, man, for day 3 recap on the Colts. And it'll be interesting to see, man, how some of these competitions, kicking competition and other ones, play out. But I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely, no problem. It's been a lot of fun, and I think there's a lot of storylines to follow moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, you take care, my friend.
Thanks, you too.